The Wizard of Oz. What can I say about this movie that hasn't been said before? This movie is the definition of iconic. We have all seen this movie. We know the songs, the quotes, the iconic moments. There have been urban legends, unofficial sequels, unofficial prequels, retellings, and video games. But despite this movie sending the story into the modern mainstream, the original book series by L. Frank Baum has fallen to the wayside, to the point where some people forget that it's an adaptation of a book. You know what? I want to change that. In this series, I'm going to give these books the recognition they deserve. So let's get started with the first book, the one that started it all, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Now, both stories start off the exact same way. Dorothy is a young girl who lives with her aunt and uncle and her pet dog, Toto. But in the book, there are no real-life counterparts to the Oz characters, such as the three farmers, Mrs. Gulch, and Professor Marvel. It's just Dorothy and her aunt and uncle in Kansas. But here's the thing about Kansas. It kind of sucks. It's all gray and drab, and her aunt and uncle are so old and so sad that the sound of their niece laughing scares them. I'm not kidding. Aunt Em had been so startled by the child's laughter that she would scream and press her hand upon her heart whenever Dorothy's merry voice reached her ears, and she still looked at the little girl with wonder that she could find anything to laugh at. One day, a cyclone appears, and Dorothy and Toto aren't able to make it to the cellar, and are trapped in the house when the cyclone picks it up, despite the fact that that's not how tornadoes work and that house should have been absolutely destroyed. But luckily, the tornado carries Dorothy and Toto safely to the point where Dorothy falls asleep instead of being knocked out like in the movie. Eventually, the house lands in Oz, and Dorothy encounters the Munchkins and the Good Witch of the North. However, the Witch of the North isn't Glinda. Instead, she's a much older woman who wears white. Brief spoiler, Glinda does appear later. Speaking of witches, Dorothy also mentions that Aunt Em told her that, quote, Em has told me that the witches were all dead years and years ago. Let's not try to think about that too hard. The Munchkins and the witch believe Dorothy is a powerful sorceress, which confuses Dorothy, until the witch shows that her house crushed another witch. Dorothy, understandably, feels really guilty about this. But the witch assures her that she enslaved the Munchkins and deserved to die. The witch then crumbles into dust. Why? She was so old, explained the Witch of the North. And also, probably having a farmhouse fall out of the sky and crush you probably doesn't help either. The Good Witch decides to give Dorothy the magic shoes she was wearing, which in this version are called the silver shoes, not the ruby slippers. Which, when you think about it, is a weird thing to call shoes because they're not technically slippers, they're heels. But then again, ruby heels just doesn't roll off the tongue. Dorothy is understandably confused and terrified and finally asks how she can get home. The witch and the Munchkins, however, give her bad news. Oz is surrounded by a desert that turns anything alive into sand. Again, let's not think about that too hard. Hearing this, Dorothy starts to cry uncontrollably. Again, understandably. So the witch decides to, okay, listen to this. As for the little old woman, she took off her cap and balanced the point of the end on her nose, while she counted 1, 2, 3 in a solemn voice. At once the cap changed into a slate, on which was written in big white check marks, "Let Dorothy go to the City of Emeralds." Okay, let's just recap what just happened. The witch takes her hat, puts it on her nose, so she's balancing it like a show dog with a beach ball. She counts to 3, and it turns into a slate with chalk written on it, calling Dorothy by her name. Reminder, neither the witch or the Munchkins knows Dorothy's name. How does the hat know who Dorothy is? Forget the magic shoes. What's the deal with the hat? Why does no one talk about the hat? Okay, let's get back on track. Dorothy begs the witch to come with her to the Emerald City, but the witch can't, for some reason. But the witch knows that the journey is very dangerous, so she gives Dorothy a magical kiss on the forehead that will protect her from any harm. Aww. The next day, Dorothy prepares for her journey. She goes back to the destroyed house to get snacks, puts on a sunbonnet, and a blue and white dress. But then she realizes her shoes are worn out and are not fit for a long journey. So she decides to put on the silver shoes, which seem to fit her perfectly. Fortunate, considering that they previously belonged to an unknown year-old lady. But before Dorothy sets off on her journey, she attends a party thrown by a wealthy Munchkin named Bach, who, despite what Wicked told you, is not the Tin Man. He is a rich and influential figure in Munchkinland. Bach appreciates Dorothy wearing a blue and white dress. Dorothy asks why. Bach explains that blue is the favorite color of the Munchkins, as you could probably tell by all the images involving the Munchkins. But he explains that witches wear white in Oz. The good ones, anyway. After the party, Dorothy sets off on her journey. And from there, it's pretty much the same story. Dorothy encounters the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. But there are some differences. In the book, the Scarecrow and the Tin Man both have more of a backstory. The Scarecrow was created by a pair of Munchkin farmers literally the day before. He initially thought he was a Munchkin himself. A Munchkin that sits on a pole and does nothing except watch for crows all day. The first day he was made, a murder of talking crows shows up at the farm. The leader crow realizes that the Scarecrow is made of straw and thus can't harm him or the other crows. The entire murder of crows eats the farmer's corn. This saddens the Scarecrow, but one old crow tells the Scarecrow that if he got a brain, he can be as good as a real Munchkin. Thus, he joins Dorothy on her quest. The Tin Man, however, was once a human. I think he might have been a Munchkin or some other kind of Ozian humanoid. But he was once made out of flesh, and he was also in love with a Munchkin girl. But the girl's mother didn't want her daughter to marry because her mother was extremely lazy and wanted her to do all the housework. So her mother asked the Wicked Witch of the East to curse the Tin Man's axe so it would chop off all his limbs and eventually his entire body. But he was able to get a new body from the local tinsmith. But he lost his heart and couldn't feel love again. So he wants to go to the Emerald City so the wizard can give him a heart so he can feel love for his lover. Aw. And the lion is just a big lion who can talk. There's also more obstacles that the party faces, such as large trenches that they have to jump over, and unfriendly creatures called the Caledons, who are creatures that have the heads of tigers and the bodies of bears, in case you were wondering where that came from. The party comes across a lake, and the Scarecrow suggests building a raft from the surrounding trees, but then he gets stuck on a pole while they're trying to cross it, but gets rescued by a friendly talking stork. The poppy field is also in the book, and it has the same effect. They make Dorothy and the Lion go to sleep because they're organic, but the Tin Man and the Scarecrow don't go to sleep because they are not organic. But instead of Glinda making it snow, the Tin Man gets help from a character who wasn't in the movie, the Queen of Mice. The Tin Man saves her from a different jungle cat by chopping its head off. Reminder, this guy cries when he steps on a beetle. In return, the Mice Queen calls all her subjects to help out the Tin Man and Scarecrow. After all that, they finally make it to the Emerald City and are allowed to see the wizard, but one day at a time and on separate days. Also, in the Emerald City, everyone has to wear green-tinted glasses, because according to the Guardian of the Gates, the city is basically a solar eclipse. It is beautiful, but if you look at it without protection, you better get used to wearing sunglasses your whole life. We're also introduced to another character that wasn't in the movie, Jellia Jam, the Royal Maid of Oz. And yes, her name is a play on Jelly and Jam. She shows the party to their rooms and helps Dorothy pick out a new dress. Anyway, the party each meets with the wizard on their respective days, and each time his form is different. When Dorothy sees him, he's a giant floating head. When the Scarecrow sees him, he's a girl with wings. When the Tin Man sees him, he's an amalgamation of different beasts. And when the Lion sees him, he's a giant ball of fire. But in all four meetings, he requests the same thing. Kill the Wicked Witch of the West, and I'll give you what you want. The characters aren't too happy about this, but they don't seem to have a choice. So they set off on another journey to where the witch lives. The land of the Winkies. That's what those green things are in the movie, by the way. But in the book, they're all yellow, because that's the favorite color in the West. While traveling, the green dress Dorothy is wearing suddenly turns white. The witch is able to see the party coming, and thanks to her magical eye that is powerful as a telescope, she decides to send her army of wolves after them. The wolves attack the Tin Man, But after feeling guilty about killing the wildcat, he decides to empathize with the wolves and seized his axe, which he had made very sharp, and as the leader of the wolves came to the Tin Woodman, swung his arm and chopped the wolf's head off its body, so it immediately died. As soon as he could raise his axe, another wolf came up, and he also fell under the sharp edge of the Tin Woodman's weapon. There were 40 wolves, and 40 times a wolf was killed, so that at last they all lay dead in a heap before the Woodman. Okay, that's a very violent solution for a kid's book, but works. After that, the witch decides to send her murder of crows after them, and apparently they're the same crows that attacked the Scarecrow all those years ago. So the Scarecrow decides to use a smart and logical solution to defeat them. The King Crow flew at the Scarecrow, who caught it by the head and twisted its neck until it died. And then another crow flew at him, and the Scarecrow twisted its neck also. There were 40 crows, and 40 times the Scarecrow twisted a neck, until at last all were laying dead beside him. Elfring said that he made Oz to be the fairy tales of their time, and to remove all the horrors and heartache associated with fairy tales. I don't know why he thought putting stuff like this in the book wouldn't be horrifying. So then, the witch decides that third time's the charm and sends a swarm of killer bees after them. And guess what happens next? Yep, the bees all die. All of them try to sting the Tin Man, but lose all their stingers and immediately all die. So the witch decides that 4 times the charm and sends her enslaved Winkies armed with spears to go after them. But then when they show up, they are brutally mauled by the lion. Nah, just kidding, he just scares them off. The witch turns to her last option and grabs a magical cap that summons you guessed it, the flying monkeys. The flying monkeys appear at the witch's castle, and she tells them to attack and destroy the Scarecrow and Tin Man, but she wants the lion and Dorothy alive. The monkeys do what they're told, but the leader says that this is the last task that they can do for the witch, as the keeper of the golden cap can only summon the monkeys 3 times. The monkeys then attack the party, and they actually prove to be a challenge. They unstuff the Scarecrow, throw the Tin Man in a ditch, and tie up the lion with ropes. However, they can't harm Dorothy because of the witch's kiss. So, they take her and the lion to the Witch of the West. The witch imprisons the lion, intending to starve him until he commits to her and becomes her steed. And she makes Dorothy work for her, practically turning her into a slave. But what she really wants is Dorothy's silver shoes, because there's some charm to them that is very powerful, but is unknown. In one of her attempts, she makes a iron bar invisible and places it on the floor. Thus, Dorothy trips over it and loses one of her shoes. In response, Toto bites her, but she doesn't bleed because all her blood has dried up. This just keeps getting weirder by the second. You probably know what happens next. Dorothy takes a bucket of water, she dumps it on the witch, and the witch melts away. Except here, she does it intentionally, not accidentally. With the witch defeated, Dorothy frees the lion, steals the golden cap, and with help from the Winkies, repairs the Tin Man and stitches up the Scarecrow. And with that, they're off to see the wizard. Again. But on their way, they get lost, so the Tin Man tries to get help from the Queen of Mice. The Queen suggests using the golden cap and summoning the flying monkeys, which works, and the monkeys fly them to the Emerald City. Dorothy asks the leader of the flying monkeys why the monkeys have to obey whoever wears the cap. So the leader tells this surprisingly very detailed story that honestly would have been a good book on its own, which I'm not going to recount here, but the whole story is basically the monkeys a long time ago ruined the wedding of a sorceress who was unrelated to the other witches. So the sorceress cursed the monkeys by forcing them to obey whoever wears the cap. The party finally makes it back to the Emerald City and meet with the wizard again, but he is nowhere to be seen. Instead, he's just a voice calling out around the room, until Toto accidentally takes down a curtain, revealing a short elderly man who says that he's the real Wizard of Oz, and that he isn't a wizard at all, or he's just a bad wizard. The party then questions him, asking if he's a fake or a humbug as they call him, how come he was able to take all those forms, and where did he come from? The wizard explains he faked all those using a different kind of wizardry, technical wizardry. The giant head was just a paper mache on a string. The girl with wings was just him cross-dressing and wearing a mask. The beast was a taxidermy creation, and the ball of fire was made of cotton and then lit on fire and hung from a string. How the string did immediately burn off and then the fire started burning the entire throne room is beyond me. How can he do this? He's actually a trained ventriloquist turned balloonist, yes, a balloonist, and accidentally flew off and landed in Oz, and was worshipped as a powerful sorcerer similar to how Dorothy was seen as a great sorceress. Apparently, he made the people make the Emerald City, and it actually isn't made of emeralds at all. Just the green glasses just make it look like it is. The characters are understandably pretty upset about this, so the wizard decides to make DIY versions of their wishes. He makes a brain made out of straw for the Scarecrow, a heart made out of silk filled with sawdust for the Tin Man, and some liquid courage for the Lion. Look, it's not a kid's story without a joke only the parents get. But for Dorothy, he decides to give her a ride in his hot air balloon that brought him to Oz. That he still has. And it still works, apparently. And decides that the Scarecrow is in charge of the Emerald City. For some reason. But you probably know what happens next. Toto sees a cat and chases after it, and Dorothy doesn't make it to the balloon, and Dorothy is still stuck in Oz. This is the literary equivalent of a YouTuber saying the video is done, but then you notice the runtime. Alright, now that the wizard's gone, Dorothy's only option is to see the most powerful sorceress in Oz, Glinda, the Good Witch of the South. Yes, Glinda is the Witch of the South and not of the North, in case you were wondering why there wasn't a Witch of the South in the movie. Dorothy and her friends, including the Scarecrow, despite the fact that he's supposed to be running a city, but oh well, set off on their journey. Again. While on their way, they encounter a whole set of new problems, such as the fighting trees. Those are the creepy trees from the movie. A jungle where all the animals are being terrorized by a giant spider. And when the party arrives, the animals ask the lion if he could kill the spider because he has his newfound courage. The lion hunts down the spider, and guess what? He rips its head off. What is up with these characters and decapitations? And after that, the characters make it to China. Yes, China. The country in Oz where everyone is made of China. This stuff. Fun little fact about China. It's fragile, and it can break easily. So the characters, including a giant lion, a guy made out of tin, and a dog that chases anything that moves, are just strolling around among these living creatures that can break easily. And guess what happens next? Yep, they break one and decapitate her. Okay, they accidentally break her leg, but honestly, would you be surprised at this point if they decapitated her? After that endeavor, they finally make it to the home of Glinda, the land of the Quadlings, who are basically Munchkins, except they're obsessed with the color red instead of blue. They finally meet Glinda. She's pretty much the same in the movie, a kind, gentle witch with blonde hair, except she wears a white dress instead of a pink dress because of the weird color rule. The party gives Glinda the golden cap, as they have used all 3 wishes, and she plans to use the cap to help Scarecrow go back to the Emerald City and rule it, and the lion to rule over the animals he saved from the giant spider, and the Tin Man to finally reunite with his Munchkin girlfriend to finally... The Winkies were very kind to me, and wanted me to rule over them after the Wicked Witch died. I am fond of the Winkies, and if I could get back again to the country of the West, I should like nothing better to rule over them forever. What are you doing? What about your Munchkin girlfriend? Why? After all that, Glinda reveals the purpose of the magic silver shoes, to take Dorothy home the whole time. Dorothy prepares to leave and says goodbye to her friends and is taught how to use the same trick in the movie, clicking the heels 3 times and saying there's no place like home. But instead of just waking up in Kansas, she jumps all the way back to Kansas. Just like that. And also conventionally, right in front of her Aunt Em and Uncle Henry. Why are magical objects so powerful in this universe? And that's the book. Final thoughts. I like this book. It's definitely a sweet story, even with all the surprisingly violent and truly bizarre scenes, but that just makes this book more memorable. I just think it's strange that despite there being a whole series of books, it's just that one movie most people think of. And that is why I'm looking forward to talking about the sequel books, the ones that not many people have attempted to adapt. So those are going to be fun. Stay tuned for that.